Donald J. Trump, President of the United States. I still think it's shocking. Regardless of your political affiliation, his victory is one of the most astounding victories we've ever seen in the history of U.S. politics. And you hear surprises all the time. You hear that word all the time. What a shock, what a surprise that was. But when you think about it, you see surprises everywhere in life. For example, I work at ESPN. I'm a sportscaster. Every day you hear the word upset. Big upset last night in the game. A huge shock happened tonight. Look at the Super Bowl. New England Patriots rally. They win against the Atlanta Falcons. What a shocking upset that was. In the NBA Finals, the Golden State Warriors 3-1 lead. Cleveland Cavaliers roar back to win. Absolute stunner. Who saw this coming? And of course in baseball, the Chicago Cubs end 108 years of futility, and they do so in dramatic fashion, rallying from 3-1 down against the Cleveland Indians. I've also had a life full of surprises. One of my surprises, and trust me, I'm as surprised as anybody that I'm the first Muslim sportscaster in the history of ESPN. But I also love movies. I've long been bit by the bug. I love motion pictures. Always said to my parents, I love movies and I love sports. I'm all about escapism. I like to just avoid reality. That's what I'm about. And my love for movies has evolved into another vocation, because at ESPN I said to my bosses, I love movies so much, why don't I do a podcast? Everyone's got a podcast. Everyone and their grandmother has a podcast now. I want to have a podcast too. So I have a podcast called Cinephile. And sure enough, I've interviewed some of my favorite actors, some of my heroes, Robert De Niro, Billy Bob Thornton, Viggo Mortensen, you name it. And lo and behold, surprise as it was, I started this podcast last May. And guess where I was just a few weeks ago? On a red carpet just like this. I was at the Oscars because my friend Ben Lyons, who works at ESPN LA, said, I love your podcast, and I was working for the Academy. And so, yes, you see where this is going. I saw one of the biggest upsets in movie history. Moonlight won Best Picture. I was actually there backstage. I couldn't believe it. I was there with my co-host in my tuxedo when Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway had the unfortunate snafu. Indeed, one of the biggest shockers, the biggest shock since Shakespeare in Love in 1998 beat Saving Private Ryan. Moonlight wins Best Picture. So basically we can see here, politics, sports, entertainment. Surprises happen all the time. We shouldn't be shocked by what's around us. And yet the story that I want to share with all of you tonight, to me, still astounds me. I'm Canadian. I was born in Toronto. I grew up in a small town called Kingston, a few hours away. And it was a wonderful childhood. You know, being a minority, I never felt that way. I was always in an environment of being inclusive and being treated wonderfully by my parents, by my teachers, by my friends. I never felt excluded. Maybe I'm just fortunate to be a Canadian. Maybe it was just the right time. But I never had this feeling of being an other. The only thing people ever held against me was I wasn't as good a hockey player as I should have been, considering my heritage. But we had an incident which really cut close to home just a short time ago. Now, I've lived in Connecticut since 2010, moved down with my family to work at ESPN. And after the Paris attacks, there was a shooting that occurred at our mosque. And the local president, Dr. Mahmoud Qureshi, called a few of us and said, we need to have an emergency meeting. I want to tell you what's happened here. And we were astounded. We said, how could this happen? He said, there's actually bullet holes in our mosque, in our place of worship. And so many thoughts start going through your head. You say, wow, this isn't just something on the news now. This is actually affecting us. Here in Connecticut, somebody would actually do this. And so the police are involved. The FBI is involved. It feels so surreal that this is actually happening in our own backyard. And so they do some digging, and they said, all right, we think we're on to something here. And in the immediate aftermath, you say, okay, how do we deal with this? You grapple with your newfound reality. And for my wife and my children, and you say you can't be deterred by it. You still go to the mosque. You still carry on the way you would always. And yet it's now a different world. So our president said, this is the information that's been gleaned to us. The FBI has been very diligent. The police force came, talked to all the kids at our mosque, told us they'd be safe, told us what the repercussions were. And they said the FBI found out who it was. The person who shot at our mosque in the wee hours of Saturday morning after the attacks in Paris was our next door neighbor. And I said, hang on a second. When this happens from some outside nebulous force, you can understand it. But the guy who lives right there, he shot at our mosque? He's like, yes. His name is Ted Hakey. He had served overseas, had a few drinks, saw what was happening in Paris, felt frustrated, has seen all these Facebook messages about anti-immigrants and anti-Islam, and someone's got to take a stand and someone's got to do something. So he grabbed one of his guns, fired a few shots, 2 in the morning, and these were the repercussions. So our president said, this is an opportunity for us here to kind of spread the message of what true Islam is, how whatever he feels, whatever he thinks that our religion is, isn't actually accurate whatsoever. So we met with him, because obviously he was arrested. We met with him and his lawyer. And I was not privy to that meeting, but what my brothers in faith told me was, the second you walked in, you saw the look of sincerity and contrition on Ted Hakee's face. And he said what I just told all of you. Been overseas, I've had some challenges, I had a few drinks, and it was a terrible, terrible lapse in judgment. And he was devastated by it, and he was so emotional about it. And there are some I know when I tell this story, say, crocodile tears. This is just somebody who's begging for clemency now. But if you ask anybody in that room, they could see he was sincere and genuine. And our president is now looking at somebody who took a rifle and shot at our mosque and said, we forgive you. No questions asked. He said, we're following what our holy book, the Holy Quran, teaches us. If somebody is sincere in their contrition, if somebody is genuine, you move on. You hug them and embrace them as a brother. And he also said, this isn't your fault entirely. This is our fault. You're a next-door neighbor. We should have told you what our faith is about. We should have explained what we're doing here, rather than you getting your messages from the wrong forces. We have alislam.org, a website you can check out. We have a True Islam campaign via Twitter. We can tell you what our spiritual leader tells us, Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, who's based out of London, England. We should have been telling you, so that way there wouldn't be any ignorance, any negative thoughts in your head. And we actually went to the court at the sentencing, because this is a hate crime now. The court's going to charge this, and the prosecutor is going to do it with heavy impunity. And we said, Your Honor, we'd like to dismiss the case. If it's up to us, we don't believe that Mr. Hakee should serve any prison time whatsoever. And the prosecutor's thinking, well, hang on, this has to be a deterrent. You have to send a message. You have to put him in prison so others will not follow suit. But our community said no. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community said no. He made a mistake. He was genuine. He was sincere. We'd like to move on. The judge was astounded. Said, I'm going to curtail the sentence. I'm not going to give the sentence I would have given. And a large part of that is because of what you all are saying. Because of how sincere and genuine all of you are, I will also express that sincerity and generosity. And the story, amazingly, doesn't end there. Ted Hakee's now been released from prison, but while he was in prison, members of our community went, visited him, wrote letters to him, genuine welfare to see how he was doing. He actually came to our national convention in Pennsylvania last year, and again, was welcomed as one of us. Hugged, embraced, spoke, and he said, I'm going to work hard for you guys now. I'm completely 100% with you guys. Whenever I hear anybody speak negatively about Islam in my community, when I see Facebook posts, when I hear what my buddies overseas may say about all of you guys, I'm going to tell them the truth, that you guys are the good guys and that all of you are genuine. And this has been a life-changing moment. And when I hear the story, I think it's a life-affirming moment. So I'd like to close by telling all of you, I understand we live in heated times right now. The rhetoric is at full boil. And it feels like neither side is listening to the other side, and everyone's just shouting and screaming. But I really hope that my story here tonight, this story of transformation, and story about one person seeking redemption and atonement, and forgiveness in the face of discrimination, is a story that shows all of us here collectively there's always a chance for hope, and that there's always a better way. My peace and blessings upon all of you. Thanks for having me.